Hi everyone, welcome to my studio and welcome to this video. My name is Pauline, I'm an illustrator and artist, and I'm going to show you today, well, it's going to be a bit of a sketchbook exercise, and I'm going to draw 3 nests in 3 different ways. If you're already on my Patreon, we are going to draw nests this month, so this could be a really good exercise to start to prep for our session. I'm starting here with a brush pen, and I'm just going to loosely draw, just making the shape of a nest, but really loosely to make it look like the branches are intertwining. And it doesn't really matter what kind of a shape it is exactly. It doesn't have to be round, it doesn't have to be an oval. You can make it any shape you want, basically, because nests have all kinds of shapes. I'm now using an Ecoline lighter brush pen, and then I'm going to draw some of the twigs. And I'm also going to do this really loosely, not paying too much attention to the reference picture I am using, but just having fun and, seeing where my pencil takes me. I'm just thinking about sort of strips that I'm going to weave together like a basket. And after that, I'm drawing a few eggs. I quickly realized this one was too small, but that's okay. I can correct that later. And now I'm going to give it a bit more contrast by adding a few shadows. Just, just thinking of the nest as like a sort of cup shape where it's darker in the middle and lighter on the outside. I then also give the twigs some shading. So where they go under another twig, I add some shadow. And I'm using a Derwent pencil, I think. Yeah, a Derwent Lightfast, which are lovely pencils and then go over a lot of material. So it's a nice pencil to use. Putting a few thicker lines where I want things to pop out a bit more. And where it's darker. And then adding a bit of shadow with a brush pen. I am then using an acrylic brush marker for the eggs. This is a ceramic blue one from Gelatos, and it's not completely opaque, but that's also because I didn't let everything dry. So I would advise you to let everything, if you have the time, let everything completely dry in between all the steps. As you can see, the paper is also peeling a little bit, but that's okay. It's just a sketchbook exercise. So I'm just coloring it in. And also letting it dry, adding a few speckles on the eggs with a lighter brush pen, also acrylic, because the acrylic pens are more opaque. And then I'm adding some extra shadows with a darker brush pen. This is a watercolor one because it's translucent. It's very nice for shading. Then I'm going back in to add a few more shadows. So I'm basically building everything up from light to dark. And when I think I'm almost ready, I then add some highlights to make some parts come more to the foreground. I'm adding some highlights with a white pencil on the eggs to make them shine and make them more 3D, and then also adding some highlights to the twigs, especially the ones that are more in front, so they can pop out and give everything a more of a 3D look. You can be as detailed or as loose as you want with this. I'm then using a Derwent Inktense pencil. They're very intense, and I'm using it to give the shadows just a little bit more. And you can play around with this, making some parts really dark, especially in the middle, and adding some small twigs to the side. I'm also adding some highlight, some lighter twigs. And I think that's basically it. I'm going to start with the second one, and as you can see, there is part of the first one on the right side, but that's because I had to let everything dry in between, so I'm showing you this in the right sequence, but you can see some of the parts I was doing in between. I'm using Gonzai Tombi watercolors for this, and this is not the best paper for it. I'm working in a art creation, a Royal Talents sketchbook, and as you can see, it's buckling a bit. So ideally you would use waterpaper for this, so you can make nice blotches and make the watercolor run. So I started with a light layer and then adding darker colors in the middle and keeping it on an angle now, so that the paint doesn't flow in the wrong direction. And because watercolor always dries lighter, I'm adding a bit of gouache, which is more opaque, because I want the middle to be darker. And I'm just playing around with this. I didn't have a set plan for any of these nests. I just went along and you know, thought, what can I do? What materials can I use? What would be nice? I'm just experimenting in my sketchbook. I then used a hairdryer because it all took too long. And then I went back in with my gouache palette. I am mixing a bit of like a rusty colour with a bit of dark purple, and then just loosely sketch some twigs or like the shadows of the twigs. It all depends on how you look at it. And just, again, I'm thinking of how they would intertwine like a woven basket. But there's I did no sketching. I'm just playing around with the shapes and seeing how it goes. If I hold the brush at an angle, I get thicker lines, and if I hold it more upright, they're thinner. So I'm playing around with that as well, doing the thicker lines more in the middle and the thinner lines more on the edge. I'm then adding a bit of light blue because I thought that would complement the color of the eggs on the right. And I did make the light blue a bit more grey. And this way there are like different colors weaving together, which I think is quite pleasing for the eye. And then using a bit of, well, it's a green yellowy color, but I didn't quite like it, so I'm now using an orange one. And I quite like how the colors now complement each other. I then thought about the eggs and thought, well, maybe I could do like cutout eggs. So I used some acrylic markers and layered them up a bit. I forgot to wait until they dried, so they all smudged a bit, but that's okay because that's sort of the texture I was looking for. So I'm just doing this on regular cartridge paper and then using some of the gouache to add some of the blue, cutting them out and sticking them in my sketchbook with some glue. And also just playing around with where they should be. Maybe a bit like this, yes. And then adding some shadows and some texture with colored pencil. I was just testing some colors. Some of them I didn't really like. This one was a bit too pink, so I tried another one, and I thought maybe the light blue would work, but that didn't really show on the eggs. So I think maybe if I would have let it all dry. So basically the key thing is to let everything dry. But I then used another blue color which worked a bit better, just to give it some more texture and make them stand out a bit more. And then my trusty Derwent Inktense pencil again, and with an acrylic marker pen adding some highlights. I then decided it needed a bit more of a sanguine reddish color, and because I like that, I also added it a bit to the nest itself. Oh yeah, I'm just playing around with everything, adding some more contrast with the Inktense pencil, which I can highly recommend. This is the bark one, which is a lovely color, and you can also dilute them with water. So for the third one, as you can see, I've already made the base layers of the first and the second one, but I'm letting them dry. The third one I am using Faber-Castell Gelatos for, which are pretty hard to find because they were discontinued, but I really love them. They are like soft pastels, but without the mess, basically. But you could use soft pastels or pastel pencils or anything that makes a soft background. So I just used a sponge to make it like a more diffuse, and a darker color for the middle because I like it to be a bit, if it's darker in the middle, then the eggs stand out better. And I've been really into ink lately, so I'm using this glass dip pen and some acrylic ink to draw the twigs of the nest. And I'm also playing around here again because this is like a spiraled one and it holds quite a lot of paint. So as you can see, I actually made like a blotch at the beginning, which I thought was a bit too much, but I can use that as well to dip my pen in, and it gives really nice marks. So like with the other brush pens, the dip pen, if you hold it more at an angle, then it gives you thicker lines. And if you hold it more upright, it gives thinner lines, and you can like scratch with it, especially with the pastel behind it. It gives it a bit of a scratchy texture. So I really like that, and I just decided to play around with that and see what would happen. And in the end, I liked this so much that I didn't add any eggs, because I like the middle. I like the markings the middle part made, so I didn't draw any eggs. I'm just playing. And you could probably also play around with different kinds of inks. I only used one and some highlights, as you can see later. But maybe if you would use like a light middle tone and a dark toned ink, you could really get some nice depth into it. That would also be really nice. And as you probably can also see, I didn't really wait until the ink dried because I didn't have a lot of time and I had to get my kid, pick my kid up from school. So I had to do this like really quickly. And I tried a white pencil on it, but that didn't really work. So I used a Derwent Drawing Chinese white, and that went pretty well. I like that. And I used it also a bit to smudge out the gel pen because I thought that was a bit too bright. And then used it to make some highlights. And yeah. It's just playing around and making marks and seeing where your pencil or your pen takes you. That's the fun of nests, because they're basically they're a very basic shape and you can draw them any way you like. So I then decided to add some more greenery, just freehand a few leaves to make the sketchbook page come together. This is gouache, and I added the eggs that I wanted to draw inside the nest, but didn't. I drew them on the outside. So yeah, this is my sketchbook page. If you want, you can join us at Patreon and draw them together, but you can also do this sketchbook exercise in your own time at home. I hope you liked it, and I hope you have a lovely time drawing and sketching nests. Thanks for watching.